Hey everybody, this is one of your hosts, Laura Barnes, on the Public Domain Plays podcast.
And this is your other host, Katie.
And we have some of our wonderful actors here with us tonight. We are missing Carter and Michael, but we have Drew, Carson, Alex, and JJ here with us. Everybody say hi.
Hi.
Howdy.
Hi.
Yay! So thanks for joining us on the first talk episode of the Public Domain Plays podcast. Just a little bit about what this podcast is about. We're doing this essentially because we can, because you can do anything you want with a public domain play, and we think that rocks. And we wanted to record them and show people that you can get together with your friends and do this, and theater can be accessible, and it doesn't have to cost you anything, and then also you can take these plays and do whatever you want with them, which is exciting, and we'll talk about that later. We hope to put out a reading of a play and a discussion of that play every month. That's a little bit about the podcast.
A little bit about the play. It was written by Oscar Wilde. It premiered on Valentine's Day, 1895 at the St. James Theatre in London. We don't have a dramaturg. We are mostly just doing this from Wikipedia and SparkNotes, which we know is not the best option, but we'll see what happens. We like that Oscar Wilde was extremely gay, because this is also a very queer podcast.
Yeah, raise your hand if you're not queer. Drew's the only person raising his hand.
Sorry.
I'm bi and ace, so.
Yeah.
Anybody who wants you can spout out your sexualities. I'm bi over here.
I'm pretty
but
gay
you don't
over
have
here.
to.
Oh, okay. I used to say I was bi, but it's just been, it's been so long since, I flipped the other way. So I've been saying I'm gay until further notice.
Congratulations.
I've been through so many labels at this point. I'm just like, I'm an enigma. I'm a silly boy. I got nothing else.
Same. I have been through a lot of labels. I mostly have stuck with queer, although lately I've been going for bisexual, but queer is the most accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
It's
we're
just a
a queer
useful word.
podcast, and we like to be queer, and we like that Oscar Wilde totally had sex with men.
Yeah.
I mean, that's putting it lightly. I mean, this man was, the word I think that the courts used was he was arrested for buggery? Which is just the old-timey word for having buggery. It's gay sex, but 1890s British edition.
Oh my god.
Wait, so when you watch a British thing, and there's British people, as there are in a British thing, and they go, bugger! Are they saying gay sex? Is that what that means?
They're saying, and as a gay man, or gayish man, I think I can say that.
Yeah, but we're not swearing on the podcast.
Oh, sorry.
So
We
we're
made
gonna
it
bleep that one.
Get out.
I have wondered for years what that word meant. I thought it had to do with bugs.
Yeah.
Now we know.
I was like, is this a derogatory term for an entomologist?
Well, it sounds like something that Lady Ragnar would have a problem with. Those damned entomologists in the universities.
Too intellectual for her. People are too educated.
Well, but Algie is immensely overeducated.
How I get away with being such a scamp.
He's an Oxonian.
I love that that's her. I just love that that's her response to the accusation that he's dishonest. It's like, does it matter if he's dishonest? He went to Oxford, damn it. Can we say the D word or no?
I think what do you
We'll talk
think?
about it.
We're
I'll
gonna talk about it afterward, and so we'll let you know for future episodes.
Yes.
I'll ixnay on the
Ding dong.
We encourage your most colorful, what do you call it?
Euphemism.
Fake
The thing
swears.
Alex just did. Yeah, fake swears.
The show has been revived a great many times, too many to document, with such stars as Jeffrey Rush and Maggie Smith starring as Lady Bracknell. My parents actually went to London and saw Maggie Smith was headlining Importance of Being Earnest, and we're like, well, we're buying a ticket to that. There is also a musical that I did not have time to listen to, called Earnest in Love, which is a far worse title, but I suppose they didn't want it confused with the title of the play, and they decided Earnestly Earnest wasn't as good, I guess. That's my suggestion.
That's better.
There are such songs as Mr. Bunbury, the Muffin Song, and A Handbag is Not a Proper Mother.
Oh my god.
Is this available on Spotify or other streaming platforms?
It is.
Oh,
Earnest
this is
in
exciting.
Love.
I can't imagine that it's good.
I don't know. I listened to a little of the overture.
If it were good, we would have heard about it before, right? Like, isn't it?
Not necessarily.
Yeah, I feel like that's true.
Has
No one's ever heard of Darling of the Day, but Darling of the Day is good.
Like, I feel like in general, there's a lot of good musicals that you don't hear about. But if there's a good musical adaptation of something famous,
Yeah.
I feel like
People haven't
At
heard of
least
Grand
the public
Hotel.
Knowledge that it's not that bad, which I've never heard.
We cannot vouch for whether this musical is bad or good, but we can say it certainly exists.
It certainly exists. And the overture sounded like it was out of a 30s musical, even though the musical came out in 1960. So who knows?
That's kind of fun.
And was set in, 1890 or whatever.
Oh, there was a
1895,
revival of Anything Goes in the 60s, and the soundtrack of that also is like very specifically sounds like a 30s musical. I wonder if 30s musicals were just in.
Yeah, but Anything Goes was at least written in the 20s.
I mean, that's
For 30s.
fair. That's fair.
JJ was coming in with the musical knowledge and wasn't expecting to meet a bigger musical fan than he was, and then boom.
I frankly didn't know one existed, but it's a pleasure to meet a match and, dare I say, a superior.
I actually wrote a whole paper on musical revivals in like the 50s and 60s of musicals about or from the 1920s and the societal reason for that. So there actually is a reason.
So like McCarthyism, but like we're talking about George Gershwin.
Okay, so I wrote this paper a long time ago, and I do not remember any of my sources. But ooh, baby, were there sources? There were MLA citations out the butt. But see what I did there? I censored myself. But the gist of it was that in the 50s and 60s, we as a country, America, we were all about suppressing those emotions and pretending that we were the greatest country in the world. And we were so afraid of communism and so afraid of, like you said, McCarthyism, all of that happening, that media was so much about escapism and spectacle and just pretending that everything's great and no one's feeling bad and women are not unhappy and being oppressed. That's not happening. So instead of looking at all of the that are happening underneath the surface, we're gonna produce guys and dolls. Which I don't think was a revival. I think it was actually written in the 50s, but about the 20s.
Yes.
So that's the theory as to why musicals were so big in the 50s and 60s, is because it was like, let's pretend none of that is happening. Fricker. Mother fricker. None of that stuff is happening. Let's have a silly musical.
Yeah.
Beautiful. We learn wonderful things on this podcast. Alex, since you are just shared this good story, you shared with us a little tidbit about how you think about this play. Before we started we do like a read through one night, and then we do the play recording, and now we're just recorded the play, and now we're doing this, so everybody's tired. And but I wanted to make Alex share this thing that I thought was cute.
So I have heard and read this play so many times, and it still makes me laugh out loud. It holds up every time. It is so good. But that also means that there are certain lines that are forever branded in my memory. And every time I have bread and butter, my brain goes, the bread and butter is for Gwendolyn. I will never forget that.
How did you get introduced to the play? Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, every time that we read it, even now, I would hear other lines to be like, oh my god, this is where I got that from. A gross deception has been put upon us both. I say that. And now I know where it's from. And answer the question where I got first introduced to it. This is also a fun story. So, my high school did it, and I played the memorable role of Algernon's maid. And you might say, Alex, Algernon did not have a maid. And to that I say, yes, I know. But in this production, he had 4.
not remember. So Alex and I know each other from high school. That's how we know each other. I had forgotten that aspect of that play, that particular production. What I remember the most from that production is that our drama teacher wanted to do the thing that I hate when people do in this play, where they have Lady Bracknell played by a man, and I wanted to play Lady Bracknell. And so, like, now the thing is, when you you can, like, years later, if you're still bitter about something, you can make a podcast about it, and then, like, and then play Lady Bracknell.
Oh,
yourself.
I've done that exactly in my life as well. I was bitter for years that I never got to sing in a high school musical. I always wanted to sing in a musical, never got to. So I wrote a podcast musical so that I could sing in it.
Yeah, you did.
Nice.
And that all my friends who wanted to sing in musicals could also sing in a podcast musical.
Nice.
So I know the
what's-
feeling.
What's that podcast called? What's the podcast musical called, in case our listeners want to?
Yeah, sure. It's great that you should ask, because we technically have not, like, officially announced it yet. I work at a production company. We do podcasts and stuff. But I can announce it here. It is called Unwanted Gods, and it is a fantasy comedy about small gods that people have stopped believing in.
Ooh, I love
that
that.
sounds
That's a good
cool.
concept.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun to do. I think it's gonna be really good.
We should do a musical for Alex next time.
That would be fun.
Just because.
Are there any public domain? There must be public domain musicals.
Gilbert and Sullivan,
Gilbert and
which are
Sullivan.
maybe technically operettas, but yes.
Does anyone have any favorite lines from this play? Haz, do you want to share your favorite line?
Yes. Probably my favorite line is Gwen Littleton just delighted that she has never seen a spade. Just the class implications of all that, and a lot of the ones that are sticking out to me are ones that are missing from the 2002 movie, because this has been made into a movie twice. I've seen both movies 50 years apart, 1952 and 2002, but I saw the 2002 movie in theaters when I was 11, and I just loved it, and it was one of the first DVDs I ever bought, and I watched it over and over and over again. And there's a lot of great lines that make it into that, because there's a lot of great lines in the play. But every once in a while, there's a couple of lines that I'm like, ooh, I don't know that one as well. That's not in the 2002 movie. And that's one of them. And I also really like another Gwendolyn line. If you are not too long, I will wait here for you all my life. And just like the capriciousness of that, it's wild.
Carson has a line.
It's not really my favorite, but it's a relatable one. It's when Cecily talks about having to write everything down. Because as somebody who has ADHD, shout out to the ADHD listeners out there. I related to that a lot, because I have to write everything down too, or else I'd forget. Yeah.
Yeah, the diaries are like an interesting little part of this play, and they're like, it's harder to get it when we're just listening to it, but they're like stage directions where like Cecily and Gwendolyn are both like whipping out their diaries, which is really funny.
I also love that that's taken as proof. Like that's
Right.
that's all part of the concept. It's like, well, I wrote it down. So
Right, exactly.
obviously
And like we already
this is
know
the way
that
it is.
Cecily's diary is mostly fiction.
It's
So,
nice.
like,
Yeah, I love that she has that whole thing about like, well, memory isn't always true, and it's like, girl, what are you writing in your diary? You don't
Right,
need a
she's
diary
writing in her diary
fact?
about like Algie or Ernest proposing to her. It's like, okay, sure.
Every time I should say encounter, because it's not always reading this play, witness this play, there's another line where I'm like, I missed that joke. How did I miss that? How did I not remember that? And this time around, it's I cannot eat muffins in an agitated manner. I would probably get burned on my cups. But the line that, for some reason, it's not even that funny, but for some reason, this is the line that has stuck with me the most over the years. And that is a metaphysical speculation, and metaphysical speculation has very little bearing on the facts as we know them, because that's such a funny thing to say. Like, oh, this is hypothetical. so it doesn't matter. Like, I just love that, and she's being so like academic about it. She's like, "Oh, this is not real. You made that up, so I don't care."
She's very like academic about a lot of what she says. I love Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn's
That's
probably
so
my favorite
funny
character
about
in the
her,
piece.
is she takes the stupidest concepts and she makes them sound so sophisticated, and that's like her whole thing.
Well, and like this gets into our next question that I have, but the whole concept of like earnest as a adjective, like he's being earnest, as in he's being truthful and honest and upbeat and all that, versus Ernest the name. And she's very interested in Ernest the name, and she doesn't really care if the person she partners with is actually Ernest or not. Like, Jack says at one point, it's a terrible thing to realize you were telling the truth your whole life. And Gwendolyn's like, that's fine, you'll change. So I was reading Spark Notes earlier to see if it would spark any ideas of questions and things like that. And it said some wild things, and it said that Algie is the hero of the story. And because his lying about Bunbury doesn't harm anyone, whereas Jack lying in a way that causes distress to others due to pretending his brother is dead. That Algie is the good guy and Jack is the bad guy because of their different kinds of lying. And it just said it as if it was like an indisputable fact about this play.
I have big feelings on that.
Yes.
I agree that Algernon is the hero and Jack is not a villain, just less of a hero, but for a completely different reason.
Excellent.
And it's that Algie, I think, is the only one who is like actually seeing truth, in that he sees through all the bullcrap of high society and knows not to take anything seriously. And Jack takes things too seriously. So we as the audience, I think, naturally fall onto Algie's side because we're like, yeah, this is all stupid. You're right. This guy's got a point. Whereas I don't think it's that like, oh, people were sad that his brother died, because no one was sad that his brother died. His brother wasn't real. Like, I don't think he actually did any harm by telling that lie. I think the harm that he does is just that he takes everything too seriously, just like everybody else. Except Algie.
Right. One of the things that really strikes me in the play is the scene where, because it's interesting to me that Algie spends like Act 1 very much like very cynical about marriage, very unhappy with the idea of marriage. And then in Act 2, he just, boom, falls in love. But it's also important that in that act, at the end of that act, he's also like, well, this is a wonderful romp. Isn't this fun? And it's not necessarily like, oh, my dearest Cecily, I've wounded her. It's just like, I'm having a great time.
I've always appreciated that Algie is completely along for the ride, and he's going to try to entertain himself. But the thing is, in entertaining himself, he's really not out to hurt anyone. The only one he really hurts throughout this are people whose opinions don't really matter. Like, he hurts Lady Bracknell, and the way of him dealing with Lady Bracknell is, and by the end, Jack is there too. And I think there is some, not exactly an arc, but this, by the end, even the stage directions indicate that Jack is responding to Lady Bracknell in a curt tone / like, just dismissively, like, oh my god, obviously you should allow me to marry her. Everything has fallen into place completely. What is your problem? And I think at the beginning of the play, you couldn't necessarily say that about the character of Jack. Like, in a way that Algie has rubbed off on Jack to realize that the opinions of these people are not necessarily so important.
I also feel like I've seen interpretations of this play where it's like, oh, Cecily is just stupid, like she's just innocent, and Algie's just taking advantage of her, and he's not really in love with her because he didn't care about marriage. Like, what are the chances that he would just be like, actually everything has changed because I saw a hot girl and now I'm into marriage. But I kind of like this idea that both he and Cecily are playing with each other. And like, especially in their flirty scenes with like the letters and stuff like that, that it's not so much a like, oh, he's just taking advantage of this like silly romantic girl. It's not like, oh, they are playing and they are on the same page. And it's not so much that, oh, they have fallen in love in one day. It is that the same way that Gwendolyn and Jack are on the same page and that they both take things very seriously and are very academic about things. Cecily and Algernon are on the same page in that they're just having a good time.
They're
just
playing a game, and it's fun.
Exactly.
And if
And
it
it's
stops
fun for
being
both of
fun,
them.
good luck to them.
Yeah.
But
I banter
prefer-
like
I
you
prefer
banter
that.
too. We both banter.
Yeah.
Let's banter together.
By basically inventing phony, like societally semi-appropriate things, where obviously Algie's invented Bunbury, but then you've got Cecily, who's invented an entire and very complicated engagement, which has been broken
And he just
off.
buys in.
Oh, completely.
That's what I love, is he's just like, we're playing this game now.
He goes, oh my god, I found someone who does the same thing. And if there was ever a reason for their love, I think it would 100% be like, oh my god, you're weird in the same way that I am weird. And I love that.
That's another favorite line of mine is when he says, "I'm very upset to hear that you broke off our engagement, particularly when the weather was so charming."
Another thing that's interesting about that relationship, and like the particular line that makes me buy this relationship, is the one at the end where Algie says she is the prettiest, sweetest, darlingest girl, and I don't give two pence about her social possibilities. I feel like that is his most genuine line, I think, in the whole play, where he's very directly saying like, no, the whole point is that I don't care about that, and she doesn't either. Neither of us care about that.
His most earnest line.
Oh my god.
I had one dark thought as we were reading. Gwendolyn has a line early on where she says, "Whatever influence I had over Mama, I lost at the age of 3." Is this because her cousin got lost in the night? Because her cousin got lost in the night, and then maybe Lady Bracknell was like, "I can't. My sister is going through this terrible grief of losing her child. I can't even risk it."
Yeah, maybe.
So I'm not going to pay attention to my.
Do we get an age on Gwen? We get an
We
age
don't.
on Jack. We get 29 on Jack. So we have Jack at 29 and Algie at younger than Jack and Cecily at 18. We don't get an age on Gwendolyn. So like, yeah, maybe her mother was grieving the loss of her nephew and was
Right.
like
I'm going to stop
okay,
paying attention to my
I'm
own
not paying
daughter
attention to
because
my daughter anymore.
what could happen?
This is a question. We told people we would do this as a half hour, so we have like 5 minutes left. Because we're not going to keep them any longer than we said we would.
It's fine.
It's fine for you, but Alex, where in the world are you, and what time is it right now?
I forgot about that.
I am in Madrid, and it is 5:26 a.m.
Okay, yeah, we have some folks on the West Coast, and it's like a little after dinner time for them. Carter went to bed because it's like midnight for him. It's like midnight for me.
I live in the Midwest, and it is 10:27 here.
Mm-hmm.
So.
JJ
Yeah,
and I have our
exactly.
whole
We've
days
got
ahead of
we've
us.
got like people from all over, which is why it's like so cool that we can do this like podcast thing and like have people in different countries and like reading this play together. I think that's awesome.
I mean, the reason that I am so happy to do this at 5:30 a.m. is this combines all of my favorite things. Theater, podcasts, gay
And
people.
Gwendolyn Fairfax.
And Gwendolyn Fairfax.
But yeah, it makes sense as a podcast that we're just doing it all the way around the world. And Laura and I are internet friends who have met twice in real life. Hopefully 3 times soon, but we'll see when that happens.
We're going to go for that third time.
We're going to go for that third
Wow,
time.
that's
It's going to
the
be a
big one.
banger.
That's how you know it's serious.
It's been like 7 years, though.
Yeah, it's a long-term relationship. A question that I do want to ask about this play and all our plays is like, Do we think it holds up? Do we think people should do it? Like, Alex already gave thoughts on this. Like, yes, it holds up. Yes, we should do
Yeah.
it. Do we have any thoughts on how it should be executed? My thought on how it should be executed is stop having men play Lady Bracknell for giggles. Like, it's not funny.
Snaps for that.
It's just like,
Yeah.
It's just transphobic.
Is there a reason that became a thing?
Here's
Yeah.
my thoughts as a bisexual, bi-romantic woman. Cicely and Gwendolyn should have a enemies to lovers arc.
Oh,
that would
juicy.
be
Good.
Love that.
No.
Yeah, because with Shakespeare, they at least have the excuse of like, oh, originally Shakespeare was played all by men. But that was not true in 1895.
It was just like someone did it one time and
Yeah,
then
it
like,
happens a
oh,
lot.
Everyone was
let's
like,
all do
oh, it's a
it.
man in a dress, and that's
Like,
inherently
it's
like in our
hilarious.
high school,
Right.
they did it at the Shakespeare Center that's like 40 minutes away from our high school. And so our drama teacher was like, well, they did it at the Shakespeare Center. And it's like, they shouldn't have. Like, we shouldn't
Yeah,
either.
that was bad.
Do we think we should do this play? Like, would you do this play?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I think it holds up really well. There's a couple of weird German jokes. There's the weird Indian climate joke. It's not even a joke, it's just a line.
Yeah.
And
There's some things that I'm just like, I think that's a cultural reference that just doesn't. I don't know who Moody is or what 3-volume novels
Yeah,
Cecily's
this is
talking
why,
about.
like-
But if I were to produce this, I would just cut that line.
It would be
Yeah.
good if we had a dramaturge to like tell us this stuff, but we don't, and we're not.
Maybe
we're
one
trying to
day.
put on a play a month, so we're not looking that hard at it. But there's definitely like stuff
Do you
that
want me to like do some
maybe let's talk
dramaturgy?
about it after.
Yeah.
Okay.
You just got so excited.
I happen to have been a dramaturg before.
Excellent.
So-
Okay.
Well, and the nice thing is when we get to Shakespeare, we can, millions of words have been written about Shakespeare, so we could just steal some of those.
Yeah.
I mean, credit some of those.
Do we think what would like a modern adaptation of this look like? Like, could we 10 Things I Hate About You it? Could we Clueless it? Would we want to?
Oh, yeah.
You could 100%. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go. I'm talking too much.
No. I was just thinking of, you know how in the 90s and the 2000s you had all of these and I don't mean like a direct adaptation where you would have like, you know, the original script being used, but in the same way, you know, 10 Things I Hate About You, it feels like one of those shows that could easily be adapted to, you know, California high society, and you could have, you know, the Kardashians or something involved with, you know, another sort of famous family, and you could just there's so much scandal, like minor scandal in this, that it feels just ridiculous enough that it could play out in a series of like TMZ reports to me that
Yeah,
I
or
would-
like a Reddit thread, like, am I the butthole? Like,
Yeah.
like, oh, I've been pretending to be named Ernest this whole time. And now my fiance like really wants me to be Ernest. Like, am I the butthole?
I could definitely see that.
Yeah. I, 29 male.
It honestly comes off like a lot of the more like lighthearted episode arcs of like, if any of you are a fan of Succession, like it's that sort of new money, like legacy media, like, you know, owner of some conglomerate, and like, I don't know, it like just some of the way some of them talk is it still echoes. I think there's a line really early on.
There's a heavy
Right.
class theme through this play that I think could update really well.
Like, I think there's the line, I have it right here. Really, if the lower orders don't set us a good example, what on earth is the use of them? Like, it sounds exactly like how, you know, like someone who owns like a Fox News or something talks about the lower orders or whatever. Like, it just is, the language is almost word for word the same nowadays.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, Wilde puts a lot of these digs in here that are like, you know, it's like, oh, this is a trivial play, but there are some serious digs in this play that
Yeah.
are like, hey, like, our society is bad, y'all. And guess what, folks? Our society is still bad to this day. So
Yeah,
we
yeah,
can
that's the
still do
sad
this
part.
play.
But I think Oscar Wilde would be delighted to have his work turned into a trashy teen rom-com.
I agree. I realized I lied earlier. You asked me how I was first introduced to this play. And sorry, this was connected in my head, but maybe it's not connected anymore. How I first got introduced to this play was actually prior to being kind of involved in it. I read it mentioned in a book called To Say Nothing of the Dog. And To Say Nothing of the Dog is a fantastic sci fi comedy about time travelers who go back to the Victorian era. And it is heavily inspired by Ernest. And it is a very similar vibe.
Hit me
And
with
they
that name
reference
again.
it specifically. To Say Nothing of the Dog.
Excellent.
It is about a time traveler who's in the Victorian era, saves a dying cat, realizes that because of the butterfly effect, saving the dying cat accidentally made the Allies lose World War II, and she and her time travel buddy have to go back and fix all the things that they that they fricked up in the Victorian era. And I just wanted to throw that recommendation out there because it's very similar vibes and has very similar social critiques.
Yeah, thank you.
But it's a
Alex.
contemporary book. I think it's from the early 2000s.
Heck yeah.
All right, well, I think we are winding down, so I want everyone to plug whatever you want to plug, whether that be a Twitter or something you're out on, or your podcast or anything like that. I will start. I am Has Katie, and you can follow me at the Has Katie on Twitter and Archive of Our Own.
Yeah.
And you can check me out coming out tomorrow from the day we're recording, and who knows how far in the past from when you're listening to this. I am guesting on a podcast called Fat Girl Book Club, and I talk about a book called Fat on Film with that host, Jen.
Yeah, if you ever need a book rec, Has is the person to go to.
Yes, I am a librarian. Although it sounds like Alex knows the great books too.
Has and Alex, we have great book recommendations on this podcast. I don't have anything to plug because I'm currently unemployed. So if anybody wants to hire me to do anything, please do. I'm going insane. I started a podcast. You know I'm in a bad place.
Laura, you can plug our Twitter for our podcast.
Oh, right. We so definitely follow us on our socials. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Twitter is PD Plays Pod, and other places we're just Public Domain Plays. We have an email, publicdomainplays@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your thoughts there. Or on our website, publicdomainplays.com, which we would totally have up and running by the time we release this podcast, and I'm going to figure out how to work WordPress.
We're going to figure out how to work it.
We're going to figure out how to work WordPress because I've already given up and I'm like, Has, you have to come help me. But do other people have things that they want to plug?
I just have a Twitter, honestly. It's Prince Edward, because if you know me very well, you will know the reference to Twitter name.
I'm Alex Kingsley, and I am Alexy Quest, like Galaxy Quest, nice. The 1998 classic. But it's my name on both Twitter and TikTok, and I'm active on both of those. And also, I work with a production company called Strong Branch Productions. We do podcasts and tabletop games. Our biggest podcast is a scripted sci-fi comedy called The Stench of Adventure, which I write, and it's a lot of fun. And season 2 just finished, so you can listen to that. And I also make tabletop games with Strong Branch Productions, and they are all pay what you will, because I like games to be accessible when they can be, at alexyquest.itch.io.
Woo!
I think that's what I got to plug.
Should you want to find me, you can find me at JJ Tyson Comedy on Instagram. I do some, I almost swore, but yeah, I do some fun, non-BS-y reels and comedy. I do stand-up and some other stuff, and it's super fun, and you should totally check it out. Yeah, JJ Tyson Comedy.
JJ and Drew and I all met when we were on a college comedy troupe, so that's how we know each other. And JJ is still doing comedy, and Drew and I have noped out of that, I think. I don't want to speak for Drew. Drew, do you have anything you want to plug or anything, or do you not want to be found?
My name is Drew. If you want to be a little creep and follow me, my name is Drew Vollmer. Yeah, I have a question actually.
Yeah, hit us
Have
with
you been?
it.
Do you have any ideas of what you will do for a second or future episode?
Boy, do we.
Little teaser.
So we're hoping. Can I? We okay.
Yeah.
We're hoping next month to do a play about robots. Like it's this old play
Is
about
it
robots, and
RUR?
it's in the public domain.
Is it
Yes.
RUR?
Yeah,
Yes,
it's
it is.
RUR.
Oh my god! Cool.
I'm glad that Drew knew. Yeah, so we're hoping to do RUR next month, and then in October we're gonna do Macbeth because of the spooky witches.
Spooky time.
So
Oh,
we've
love
got
'em.
like a couple months planned out.
But listeners, if you have any public domain plays you would like to hear on this podcast, send us an email or hit one of those Twitters, and we will definitely consider it.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all of our actors for being in this play and like staying on here late to talk about it. We're so happy to be doing this podcast, and that's about all that we have to say because we said we would stop doing this 10 minutes ago, right?
The suspense is terrible. I hope it'll last.
Ah.